What's up everybody, Pasita here with Inspire Bass, helping you to advance and inspire on the bass. So you want to improve your fluidity on the bass. Well, in this video I'm going to show you 5 crucial tips that you can start doing today that'll improve the fluidity of your bass playing. Now hey, at any point in the video if you decide you want to dive deeper with your bass technique, check out the links I'll put in the description below. Let's get on with the video. Okay, so every bass groove, every bass line, or even bass run that you play will have its own unique set of challenges for playing fluidly on the bass. Okay, so here's some tips that can help give you some fluidity. If you're sitting down and playing the bass, the first tip is hold the bass like a shotgun. Okay, and what I mean by that is, if I were to square my shoulders with you, a lot of people I see have their bass on their lap, where their bass is flush against their body. Okay. And what ends up happening is as they get to their higher frets, or if they play a chord, their wrist will start to bend, okay? They start to get this type of action going on. And it's this type of action that makes it very difficult to move your fingers around on the bass. So instead, let me square my shoulders with you again so that you can kind of get a gauge on how I'm doing this. So my shoulders are now flush with you. My bass, you'll notice, is pointing forward, kind of like a shotgun, and that's why I call it the shotgun method. My headstock is actually directly above my left knee, okay? Headstock above my knee. So what ends up happening is if my bass is pointed away from my body, actually, and you'll notice there's a space here. It's not flush against my body. It's not like this. My body is kind of angled and my bass is angled away from it. As I move my wrist up the fretboard, there is absolutely zero wrist. There's no wrist bend that ends up happening. Okay? So that's the first tip. Try exploring holding your bass similar to a shotgun, keeping your headstock above where your knee is. And that'll kind of give you a gauge on what type of angle you're looking for with your bass. Now, if you're standing, it's going to be a little bit harder to accomplish that because the way the straps are on a bass, it'll naturally pull the bass flush with your body. Okay, so to eliminate wrist angles with your fret hand, raise your bass higher or wear it higher up on your body. Okay, the higher your bass is on your body, the less likely you'll experience wrist angles with your fretting hand. However, the higher it is, the more likely you'll experience wrist angles with your plucking hand. So you want to strike that balance. The second thing is, if you're playing a bass line or a bass run that has a lot of fourth intervals, for instance, something like this, you see a lot of players will use just the same finger and just bar the notes. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've seen many bass players play very fluidly like this, but if you are having difficulty achieving fluidity, try playing this type of shapes or fourth shapes using a different finger for each note. Okay? Now the benefit of doing that is that there's a certain strength that you have by having each finger, a different finger for, and a certain control that you have that you don't quite have if you're barring it, okay? Now there's nothing wrong with barring it. I've seen, don't get me wrong, again, I'll repeat this. I see a lot of players that can play perfectly fine barring the notes, but if you are having trouble barring, explore doing a different finger, okay? So that's second tip. Now the third tip, if you are ascending on your bass, crossing strings on the bass is a very difficult thing to do, okay? So for instance, if I'm playing an arpeggio, okay, if you want to achieve fluidity, a little crossing strings ascending, take a look at your hand first. Now, most people's hands, not everybody's, but most people's hands, their ring finger, I'm sorry, what is this? Your pointing finger is actually shorter than your middle finger, okay? So a lot of people's hands, you'll see most hands where the middle finger is much longer. Now, if you were to just lay your hand on your strings, it's very natural for your pointer finger to be on your lower strings, okay? So if you're playing intervals that are ascending, or you're playing a line that is ascending and crossing strings, it's very natural to lead with your pointing finger, okay? Lead with this finger. Now, if you're descending, here's tip number 4. If you're descending, do the exact opposite. Lead with your middle finger. So if you're playing, let's say, descending thirds and they're crossing strings, it makes sense to lead with this middle finger, okay? It's a lot easier. Because your fingers already are positioned to play the next string, okay? And you can try this out. If you were to try leading with the other finger, you'll notice that there's a lot more effort required, okay? So that's tips 3 and 4. Ascending, lead with your pointing finger. Descending, lead with your middle finger. And the 5th tip is if you are playing arpeggios, particularly ascending arpeggios, give this a try. It's an odd-even approach, what I call it. Odd-even. But particularly 2 notes on one string, 1 note on the next string. 2 notes on the other string, 1 note on the next. Or vice versa. 1 note on the first string, then 2, then 1, then 2. Okay, so if I'm playing an A major 7 arpeggio, okay, and I want to play this fluidly, I might start out with 2 notes on the first string, okay, and it's a hammer-on. And then I got 1 note on the second string, and then 2 notes again on the next, and it's a hammer-on. And you'll notice it's very simple to play that. Play that fluidly, okay? If I were to do the 1-2-1-2 instead of 2-1-2-1, I could do it like this. So 1, and then I could do 2, and then that's 1, okay? Now I won't play the A, I'll just play just the arpeggio. If I were to play that A, then I would shift my hand and start the sequence all over again, and now just do maybe 2-1, okay? But I find actually really the 2-1 works really well for me. Okay? Give that a try when it comes to playing arpeggios. Just starting out with 2 notes on the first string, then 1 note on the next, 2 notes on the next string, then 1 note on the next. Like if I were to carry this arpeggio, it's very easy to move up and down an arpeggio that way. Okay, so here are the 5 tips again. The first one is explore the height of your bass if you're standing. And if you're sitting, you want to explore the shotgun method. Okay, and that purpose is to eliminate any acute angles with your fretting hand. Okay. Second tip is if you're playing any sort of fourth intervals or notes that are adjacent, but particularly fourth intervals, try exploring using 1 finger for each note. If you are having difficulty being fluid, barring your notes with just a simple finger. Try doing it. Fourth one, if you're ascending, lead with your pointer finger because it's shorter and it naturally wants to start on the lower strings. If you are descending, lead with your middle finger because it naturally wants to be on the higher strings. Okay, and the fifth tip is if you're playing an ascending arpeggio on the bass, try exploring playing 2 notes on one string, 1 note on the next string, 2 notes on the next string, 1 note on the next string. So a 2-1-2-1 approach. Okay, 1 2, then 1, 1 2, then 1. Okay, and then when you that works really well both ascending and descending arpeggios. Okay, so those are your 5 tips for gaining fluidity on the bass. Let me know in the comment section below if you found this helpful. Until next time, keep advancing and inspiring on the bass. I'll see you soon. Okay, so now every groove or bass line or even solo, Stanley, go, go, go.